Imagine waking up and discovering that a mountain you have seen every day of your life is simply gone. Not hidden by clouds, not covered by fog. Gone. It sounds impossible because mountains are among the oldest and most permanent features on Earth. They survive wars, civilizations, and even ice ages. They are supposed to outlive us all. Yet this is the mystery we are exploring today. Deep inside a remote valley, surrounded by dense forests and small villages, stood a towering mountain that had dominated the landscape for thousands of years. Every road pointed toward it. Every map included it. Every local story began beneath its shadow. Then one morning, everything changed. The first person to notice was an elderly shepherd walking toward the hills before sunrise. He followed the same path he had taken for decades. As the morning light slowly revealed the horizon, he stopped. Something felt wrong. The familiar outline of the mountain had vanished. At first, he believed thick clouds were hiding the summit, but the sky was perfectly clear. As more daylight spread across the valley, an impossible sight appeared before him. The entire upper section of the mountain was missing, not damaged, not cracked, not partially collapsed. It looked as though someone had erased the summit from existence. The shepherd ran back to the village in panic. Few believed him until others stepped outside. Within minutes, people gathered in silence. No one spoke. Children stared upward. Older residents rubbed their eyes. Some even searched old family photographs, hoping they had somehow mistaken the landscape. But every picture confirmed the same truth. Yesterday, the mountain had a peak. Today, it did not. Calls flooded emergency services. Police arrived expecting confusion or a small landslide. Instead, they found hundreds of people standing motionless, all looking toward the same impossible horizon. By midday, helicopters circled above the missing summit. Pilots reported something equally disturbing. They could clearly see where the mountain should have continued upward. Instead, there was only an enormous wall of fresh rock, as smooth as if nature had sliced away the summit overnight. Even stranger, there was almost no debris below. A collapse of that size should have buried the valley beneath millions of tons of rock. But the forests remained standing. The rivers continued flowing. Nearby houses were untouched. It was as if the mountain had disappeared without falling. Scientists arriving later that afternoon immediately realized this was unlike any geological event they had ever studied. Nothing about the scene made sense. If the summit had collapsed, where was the rock? If it had exploded, why was there no crater? If it had eroded, how could it happen in a single night? Every explanation created even more questions. As news spread around the world, satellite companies began reviewing images taken only hours apart. Those images would soon reveal details that transformed an unusual geological mystery into something far more disturbing. Because according to several early reports, the mountain may not have simply disappeared. Something may have happened there during the night. And whatever it was, almost no one saw it. By sunrise, the missing mountain had become an international mystery. But to understand what happened, investigators first asked a simple question. What happened the night before? The answers were anything but simple. Police and emergency officials began interviewing every person who had been near the mountain during the previous evening. Most described an ordinary day. The weather was calm. There were no storms, no earthquakes, no explosions, nothing that could explain the disappearance of millions of tons of rock. Yet, as more interviews were collected, a strange pattern began to emerge. A farmer living on the eastern side of the valley said he noticed an unusual silence shortly after sunset. The birds stopped singing. The insects disappeared. Even the wind seemed to fade away. He had lived there for nearly 50 years. He had never experienced a silence like that before. Several hikers camping near the tree line reported something even stranger. Around midnight, they noticed faint lights moving across the upper slopes. The lights did not flash like helicopters. They did not move like flashlights. Instead, they drifted slowly through the darkness, sometimes disappearing behind the rocks before returning moments later. One camper recorded a short video. The footage was blurry. Experts could not identify what the lights were. Some believed they were drones. Others insisted the movement was unlike any aircraft. The debate continues today. A family living several kilometers away described hearing a deep humming sound just after midnight. It was not loud. It was low, more like a vibration than a noise. The windows shook gently. Water inside drinking glasses formed tiny ripples. The sound lasted only a few minutes. Then it stopped. Curiously, Nearby seismic stations recorded no earthquake during that time. Investigators checked weather radar. Nothing unusual appeared. They reviewed lightning records. There were no storms. Power companies confirmed there had been no electrical failures. Everything suggested the valley had experienced a perfectly normal night, except for the witnesses. The local wildlife added another mystery. Several shepherds reported that their sheep refused to move toward the mountain after sunset. Dogs barked continuously for hours before suddenly becoming silent. Wild deer were later found much farther from the mountain than usual. Animal behavior alone cannot explain a geological event, but experienced researchers know that unusual animal reactions have sometimes been reported before natural disasters. Whether this was connected remained unknown. Then investigators uncovered another detail. A truck driver passing through the valley around 2 a.m. claimed he looked toward the mountain and noticed something impossible. For just a few seconds, the summit seemed surrounded by a faint glow. Not bright enough to illuminate the valley, just enough to outline the peak against the night sky. He continued driving. When questioned later, he admitted he thought it was his imagination. Now, he wasn't so sure. Authorities searched for surveillance cameras. Most of the area was too remote. Only one distant highway camera had a partial view of the mountain. The footage became one of the most studied recordings in the investigation. Unfortunately, thick darkness covered most of the landscape. Nothing unusual could be clearly identified. But analysts noticed one unexplained detail. For approximately 38 seconds, the camera image experienced an unusual distortion. The mountain became difficult to see. The picture blurred. Then everything returned to normal. No equipment malfunction was ever confirmed. The timing was impossible to ignore. By dawn, the summit was gone. Investigators now had witness statements, mysterious lights, unexplained vibrations, unusual animal behavior, and a brief camera anomaly. None of it proved what had happened, but together, they suggested the night had been far from ordinary. Then satellite analysts made a discovery that changed the investigation completely. Images captured from space seemed to show something near the mountain, just hours before it disappeared. By the third day, the valley had transformed into one of the most heavily investigated locations in the country. Police blocked every road leading toward the mountain. Scientists arrived with drones, laser scanners, and ground-penetrating radar. Geologists, engineers, and emergency crews all expected the same thing. They believed they would find evidence of an enormous landslide. Instead, they found a mystery. The first helicopter survey revealed a fresh rock wall stretching across the mountain where the summit had once stood. The exposed surface looked remarkably clean. Normally, when part of a mountain collapses, the remaining rock is jagged and unstable. This cliff looked unusually smooth. Some investigators even compared it to a surface that had been cut rather than broken. No one suggested that was actually possible. But no one could explain its appearance either. Below the missing summit, rescue teams searched for debris. They expected millions of tons of shattered rock. Instead, they found only scattered boulders and loose soil. It wasn't enough, not even close. A collapse of that size should have buried entire forests. Yet the trees nearest the mountain were still standing. Some branches had broken. A few trunks leaned at strange angles, but the valley itself remained largely untouched. One geologist quietly asked the question everyone was thinking. If the mountain fell, where did it go? The question spread quickly through the investigation team. Ground-penetrating radar scanned beneath the valley floor. The instruments detected solid rock exactly where it should have been. There was no massive underground cavity, no hidden chamber large enough to swallow an entire mountaintop. The simplest explanation had already begun to fall apart. Next came the drones. High-resolution cameras mapped every meter of the exposed cliff. The images revealed hundreds of fresh fractures. Some followed natural fault lines, others did not. Several cracks ran almost perfectly straight for hundreds of meters. Nature can produce straight fractures, but seeing so many together surprised even experienced researchers. Rock samples were collected and sent to laboratories. Initial testing confirmed that the exposed surface was extremely fresh. Very little weathering had occurred. Whatever had happened recently. But the chemical composition of the rock was completely ordinary. There were no traces of explosives, no unusual radiation, no evidence of extreme heat. Nothing pointed toward a known human cause. Meanwhile, satellite companies began comparing photographs taken over several days. The image from 2 days before showed the mountain exactly as expected. The image from the following afternoon showed the summit missing. But there was a problem. A satellite had passed over the area shortly before dawn. That image contained a thick layer of cloud directly above the mountain. Only the mountain. The surrounding valley remained mostly clear. Meteorologists reviewed the weather data. According to their models, no cloud should have formed there at that time. It lasted only a few minutes, then it disappeared. Was it a coincidence? No one could say. As the investigation continued, experts from different fields reached completely different conclusions. Some insisted this was an extremely rare geological collapse. Others argued that no known natural process matched the evidence. A few privately admitted they had never seen anything like it. The disagreement soon became public. Television interviews, scientific conferences, and newspaper headlines all asked the same question. Had the world just witnessed a natural disaster, or something science had never documented before? Then laboratory analysis of the first rock samples revealed one detail that no one expected. The exposed stone appeared to have fractured under conditions that shouldn't have been possible. And that discovery pushed the investigation into even stranger territory. The first laboratory reports arrived 1 week after the mountain disappeared. Scientists expected ordinary results. Instead, they found evidence that made the mystery even harder to explain. Under powerful microscopes, the freshly exposed rock contained fracture patterns, unlike those normally seen after landslides or earthquakes. Some cracks spread naturally through the stone. Others stopped suddenly, as if an invisible force had interrupted them halfway through. Several researchers repeated the tests. The results remained the same. The rock had broken, but not in the way they expected. Meanwhile, another team climbed to the highest point that still remained. The view raised even more questions. Just meters from the exposed cliff stood ancient pine trees. Their roots remained firmly in the ground. Their trunks were almost untouched. If millions of tons of rock had crashed into the valley, the violent movement should have uprooted or destroyed them. Instead, they stood quietly in the mountain air, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. One investigator later admitted that seeing those trees unsettled him more than the missing summit itself. They simply should not have survived. Attention then turned to the region's seismic records. Earthquakes leave unmistakable signatures. Even a moderate landslide creates vibrations that can be detected many kilometers away. Scientists examined data from every nearby monitoring station. They found almost nothing. A few instruments recorded tiny disturbances during the night. But the signals were far too weak. They were thousands of times smaller than what would normally accompany the disappearance of such an enormous mass of rock. It was as if the mountain had changed, without releasing the energy that physics demanded. The contradiction divided the scientific community. Some researchers argued that an extremely rare geological process might explain the evidence. Others strongly disagreed. One professor stated during a conference, "We are looking at observations that do not fit any known model." His comment quickly spread across international news. Not everyone appreciated the attention. Soon afterward, several research teams stopped giving public interviews. Official statements became shorter. Questions about the strange fracture patterns were answered only with, "Further analysis is ongoing." The silence only fueled more speculation. Independent researchers continued examining photographs taken during the first survey flights. One image attracted particular attention. Near the edge of the missing summit, a section of exposed rock reflected sunlight differently from everything around it. Some believed it was simply wet stone. Others suggested it might contain unusual minerals. No one could agree because the area was declared too unstable for immediate inspection. As days turned into weeks, fresh clues appeared. Tiny streams flowing from the mountain suddenly changed course. Water that had followed the same channels for generations now emerged from completely different locations. Hydrologists concluded that something underground had shifted dramatically. But once again, they faced the same impossible question. How could such a massive internal change occur without triggering a major earthquake? The contradictions continued to grow. Fresh rock, almost no debris, standing trees, weak seismic activity, changing underground water. None of the evidence fit together. Each discovery solved one mystery only by creating two new ones. Then historians searching through regional archives uncovered something forgotten for more than a century. An old survey map contained a handwritten warning beside the mountain. Only 6 words. A sentence so unusual that many believed it was a joke, until they realized what it implied. The mountain has moved before. The handwritten note changed everything. At first, investigators dismissed it as nothing more than an old cartographer's joke. Maps from centuries ago often contain strange comments, local legends, or personal observations. But curiosity led historians to dig deeper. They searched libraries, church archives, and forgotten government records. What they found was unexpected. The mountain had been mentioned many times over the last 400 years, but not always in the same way. An explorer's journal from the late 17th century described arriving in the valley after following a trade route through the mountains. His sketches showed the same river, the same forest, the same villages, but the mountain's summit looked different. The drawing showed a wider, flatter peak than the one known today. At first, experts assumed the artist had exaggerated the landscape, yet other documents began showing similar differences. None of them matched perfectly. Each seemed to describe a mountain that had slowly changed shape over time. That alone wasn't unusual. Mountains erode, rockfalls happen. Nature is constantly reshaping the world. But these records describe something far stranger. Several writers claimed entire sections of the mountain appeared different after long winters. Not worn down, not damaged, simply different. One village record from the early 18th century described hunters returning from the upper slopes completely confused. They insisted that familiar trails had disappeared. Large cliffs had appeared where gentle hills once stood. The villagers believed the hunters had become lost. No formal investigation was ever recorded. Then researchers uncovered an account that had almost been forgotten. Nearly 100 years ago, a team of surveyors was sent to produce the first accurate topographic map of the region. According to official reports, the project was completed successfully. But hidden among the archived paperwork was a personal letter written by one of the surveyors. The letter was never meant for publication. In it, he admitted that several measurements refused to match previous calculations. The elevation appeared slightly different from earlier records. Not by hundreds of meters, only enough to make experienced surveyors question their instruments. The team blamed equipment errors and repeated the work. The numbers improved, but they never aligned perfectly. The discrepancy was quietly ignored. Years later, another discovery added even more mystery. Archaeologists excavating an abandoned settlement near the valley uncovered carved stones arranged in a circle. The carvings showed mountains surrounding a central peak. One mountain had been carefully chipped away, leaving only an empty outline. No inscription explained its meaning. Carbon dating confirmed the stones were centuries old. No one knew why the missing mountain had been carved that way. Local folklore offered its own explanation. For generations, families had repeated the same warning: never stay on the upper slopes after sunset. Not because of wolves, not because of storms, because, according to the legend, the mountain was never truly still. Most people dismissed the story as superstition. Until now, the modern investigation had uncovered something unsettling. Long before satellites, long before helicopters, long before geology became a science, people had already been recording unusual events connected to the same mountain. Were they witnessing natural changes they couldn't understand? Or had something unusual always existed there? The question reached government officials. Within days, additional security arrived in the valley. The restricted area around the mountain expanded. Access permits were canceled. Journalists were ordered to remain outside the new perimeter. Officials described the decision as a simple safety precaution, but several researchers noticed something unusual. The teams now entering the mountain were no longer wearing university uniforms. They belonged to agencies that had never appeared during the investigation before, and nobody would explain why. The investigation entered a new phase. Without any public announcement, the security perimeter around the mountain doubled in size. Roadblocks appeared overnight. Forest trails that had remained open for generations were suddenly closed. Officials insisted the restrictions were temporary and necessary for public safety. But many of the new checkpoints were positioned far from unstable cliffs. They seemed to protect something else. Local residents quickly noticed unfamiliar vehicles entering the valley. Most carried no company logos. Their license plates belonged to different government departments. Some arrived before sunrise. Others left long after dark. No official explanation was given. Scientists who had spoken openly during the first week became unusually quiet. Several canceled scheduled interviews. Conference presentations were postponed. A few researchers simply said they had been instructed not to discuss ongoing findings. That silence only intensified public curiosity. Journalists began flying drones near the restricted zone. At first, the flights revealed little beyond tents, survey equipment, and security patrols. Then one independent filmmaker claimed his drone captured several seconds of unusual footage before the signal suddenly disappeared. When the aircraft was recovered, The memory card contained corrupted files. Only a single frame remained intact. It showed the exposed cliff face, nothing more. But online investigators noticed a faint metallic reflection near the center of the image. Some believed it was a piece of equipment. Others argued it was simply sunlight reflecting from wet rock. The original files could never be recovered. Within days, rumors spread across the internet. Some claimed hidden tunnels had been discovered beneath the mountain. Others insisted a massive underground structure had been found. A few even suggested that the missing summit had revealed something buried for thousands of years. None of these claims were supported by verified evidence, yet they spread faster than official updates. The lack of reliable information allowed speculation to fill the silence. Meanwhile, satellite enthusiasts using publicly available imagery noticed something unusual. New temporary buildings appeared inside the restricted area. Large white tents covered sections of the exposed rock. Heavy machinery arrived. Within a week, several of those tents disappeared again. No official photographs showed what had happened beneath them. Then came one of the most controversial witness accounts. A maintenance worker assigned to repair communications equipment near the valley claimed he briefly saw investigators carrying long metallic cases out of the restricted zone. He could not identify what was inside. He never claimed they contained anything extraordinary, but his story was repeated online with increasingly dramatic details. Each retelling added something new. Each version moved further from the original account. Separating fact from fiction became almost impossible. Verified evidence remained limited. The mountain had lost its summit. The exposed rock was real. The investigation was real. The expanded security zone was real. Everything beyond that became increasingly uncertain. Even among experts, opinions began to divide. Some believed the government was simply preventing accidents, while unstable rock was examined. Others argued the unusual secrecy was unnecessary for a normal geological investigation. No evidence proved either position. Then, several weeks after the disappearance, a specialized exploration team entered a newly exposed opening near the base of the mountain. What they found inside would become the most debated discovery of the entire investigation. The moment news of the newly discovered opening reached the public, the mystery entered a completely different phase. Until now, investigators had focused on one question: how could an entire mountain disappear overnight? Now there was another. What had been hidden beneath it? Before exploring the discovery itself, scientists agreed on one important point. Every explanation had to fit the evidence, and the evidence remained stubbornly contradictory. The first and most widely accepted theory was geological collapse. According to this idea, the mountain had been weakened over thousands of years by hidden fractures, underground water, and shifting rock layers. Eventually, the summit reached a critical point. A rare structural failure caused it to collapse into an unseen underground chamber. It sounded reasonable, but there were problems. Ground-penetrating radar had found no cavity large enough. Seismic stations had recorded almost no significant vibrations, and the missing debris had never been located. The theory explained some clues, but not all of them. The second theory suggested an unknown geological process. Earth still surprises scientists. New volcanic systems, underground rivers, and unusual fault movements continue to be discovered. Perhaps this mountain experienced a process that had never been documented before. Supporters pointed to the strange fracture patterns and changing groundwater. Critics asked the same question. If this was natural, why had nothing similar ever been recorded at this scale? The third theory was far more controversial. Some believed the event involved classified human activity, the sudden arrival of government agencies, the expanding restricted zone, the silence from several researchers, all fueled speculation. According to this theory, the mountain concealed something important. The disappearance of the summit was connected to a secret operation. No verified evidence has ever supported this claim, but the secrecy surrounding the investigation ensured the idea survived. Then came the theory that captured the internet's imagination. Some people argued the lights seen on the mountain, the mysterious humming sound, the strange camera distortion, and the missing summit were connected to something beyond conventional science. Suggestions ranged from advanced unknown technology to extraterrestrial involvement. Scientists rejected these ideas due to a lack of evidence, yet millions continued discussing them online. The mystery had become larger than the mountain itself. There was another possibility, one that received far less attention. Perhaps several unrelated events had happened at the same time. Witnesses may have misremembered unusual lights, camera distortion, might have been a technical fault. Animal behavior could have had ordinary causes. When combined with an extremely rare geological event, these separate observations created the illusion of a single impossible mystery. Psychologists often warn that people naturally connect unrelated events during extraordinary moments. Could that be happening here, or were too many coincidences occurring at once? Researchers compared every theory against the known facts. The mountain lost its summit, fresh rock was exposed, little debris was found. Seismic activity remained unexpectedly weak. Historic records described earlier unexplained changes. None of the major theories explained every observation. Each solved one puzzle while leaving another unanswered. Then, members of the exploration team quietly confirmed something that had never appeared in the first official reports. Deep inside the newly exposed passage beneath the mountain, they had found something that was unmistakably artificial. And that discovery changed the direction of the investigation once again. The exploration team entered the opening just after sunrise. The entrance had been revealed only because the mountain's summit was gone. Before that night, no map had shown a passage in this location. From the outside, it appeared to be a narrow fracture in the rock. Inside, it widened into a vast underground chamber. The air was cold, completely still. Every sound echoed through the darkness. The first survey found nothing unusual, only ancient stone, loose gravel, and water dripping from the ceiling. Then one scanner detected something unexpected. Part of one wall reflected the signal differently from the surrounding rock. Investigators moved closer. Embedded within the stone was a smooth metallic surface. It was unlike anything naturally found in the mountain. At first, geologists assumed it was a rich mineral deposit, but laboratory tests on tiny surface samples suggested otherwise. The material contained a combination of metals rarely found together in nature. That did not prove it was artificial. Unusual geological formations can exist. Still, the result was surprising enough that additional testing was ordered. Nearby, explorers discovered a series of perfectly parallel grooves cut into the rock floor. They extended for several meters before disappearing beneath fallen stone. Some researchers believed they were the result of ancient geological pressure. Others argued they resembled tool marks. No conclusion could be reached. As the team pushed deeper, they found another chamber. This one was almost perfectly circular. The walls were unusually smooth. The ceiling rose high above their lights, disappearing into darkness. Laser measurements showed something remarkable. The chamber was almost symmetrical. Nature can produce circular caves, but chambers this regular are uncommon. The discovery reignited speculation around the world. Online forums exploded with claims that investigators had uncovered an ancient structure. No verified evidence supported those claims. Official statements remained cautious. They described the chamber only as an unusual geological formation requiring further study. Then came the most debated moment of the entire expedition. One member of the survey team later reported seeing faint geometric patterns on a section of exposed stone. Photographs taken from the same location failed to show them clearly. Some analysts believed the patterns were simply natural mineral veins. Others suggested they were optical illusions created by flashlight angles and shadows. Without clearer evidence, the claim remained unverified. Meanwhile, engineers continued mapping the underground passages. The tunnels extended much farther than expected. Several ended abruptly, where fresh rock blocked the route. Whether those blockages had existed before the mountain disappeared, or were created during the event, could not be determined. Outside, scientists compared everything they had learned: the missing summit, the strange fracture patterns, the historical records, the underground chambers, the unusual metallic material. Individually, each clue had a possible explanation. Together, they formed a puzzle no single theory could solve. Months later, the investigation released its largest collection of technical reports. Thousands of pages of geological data, laboratory analyses, satellite imagery, and field observations became available to independent researchers. For the first time, experts around the world could examine the evidence for themselves. Some believed the reports finally revealed the answer. Others argued they only proved how much remained unknown. And after reviewing every document, one conclusion became impossible to ignore. The greatest mystery was no longer what had been found beneath the mountain. It was which pieces of the story could actually be proven, and which had grown into legend. Months of investigation produced thousands of photographs, laboratory reports, satellite images, and witness interviews. For the first time, Researchers stepped back from the speculation and asked a different question. What do we actually know? The verified facts were surprisingly few. A mountain that had stood for centuries was found with a dramatically altered summit. Fresh rock surfaces confirmed that the change was recent. Scientists documented unusual fracture patterns. Seismic records showed far less activity than many experts expected for an event of that scale. Groundwater pathways changed after the incident. These observations were supported by field measurements and laboratory analysis. Everything beyond those points became far less certain. Witnesses described strange lights over the mountain, but no clear recording confirmed what they saw. Several people reported hearing a deep humming sound, yet no instrument captured evidence of its source. A highway camera experienced a brief image distortion. Engineers could not determine whether it was caused by the environment or a technical malfunction. Ancient maps and journals described unusual stories connected to the mountain. Historians agreed the documents were genuine, but stories written centuries ago cannot be treated as scientific evidence. They tell us what people believed, not necessarily what happened. The rumored metallic object beneath the mountain became one of the most debated discoveries. Some reports suggested unusual material had been examined. No publicly available study ever proved it represented advanced technology or anything beyond natural geology. The claim remained unverified. The same was true for the perfectly symmetrical underground chamber. Its existence was documented. Its origin was not. Nature is capable of producing remarkable formations. Without stronger evidence, no extraordinary conclusion could be justified. Researchers then compared every major theory against the verified facts. The geological collapse theory explained the fresh rock and changing groundwater, but it struggled to explain the limited debris and weak seismic signals. The unknown geological process theory accounted for some unusual observations. However, no similar event had ever been conclusively documented. The classified operation theory relied mainly on government secrecy. Restricted access alone could not prove that extraordinary discoveries had been made. Finally, the extraterrestrial explanation attracted enormous public attention. Yet despite years of discussion, no verified evidence supported it. The mystery demonstrated an important lesson. When information is incomplete, people naturally fill the gaps. Some choose the simplest explanation. Others choose the most extraordinary. Neither approach guarantees the truth. Perhaps the greatest challenge was separating coincidence from connection. Did the strange lights matter? Were the animals reacting to subtle geological changes? Was the humming sound related to the mountain at all? Or had unrelated events become woven together because something extraordinary happened that same night? No one could answer with certainty. As independent experts reviewed the evidence, most reached the same cautious conclusion. The mountain had undergone an extremely unusual transformation. Exactly how it happened remained unresolved. Some clues pointed toward geology. Others resisted easy explanation. The investigation officially closed without identifying a single cause that explained every piece of evidence. Years later, researchers still returned to the valley. New technology continued to examine the exposed rock. Every expedition hoped to uncover the missing piece of the puzzle, but the mountain remained silent. And perhaps that silence was the most unsettling clue of all. Because one final question has never been answered. If this could happen once, could it happen again? Years passed. The headlines faded. Television crews left the valley. The temporary laboratories were dismantled. The security checkpoints disappeared. Slowly, life returned to normal. At least it appeared to. The mountain never returned. The exposed cliff remained exactly where it had first appeared, standing like a permanent reminder that something extraordinary had happened there. Seasons came and went. Snow covered the fresh rock every winter. Spring rivers carved new paths through the valley. Forests continued to grow. Nature moved forward. But one question refused to disappear. What really happened that night? Modern researchers still visit the site. They bring more advanced drones, more powerful scanners, more accurate satellite imagery. Each new expedition collects another piece of information. Each one also discovers how much is still unknown. Some scientists believe the answer will eventually come from geology. They argue that Earth's crust is more complex than we currently understand, and that rare events may occur only once in thousands of years. Others believe the case will remain unsolved because the critical evidence vanished along with the missing summit. Without the lost rock, some questions may never have an answer. Local residents still tell stories about that morning. Older villagers remember exactly where they were when they first looked toward the horizon. Many describe the same feeling, not fear, disbelief, because seeing something impossible changes the way people look at the world. The mountain had always represented permanence. When it disappeared, that certainty disappeared with it. Over the years, countless books, documentaries, and online discussions have tried to solve the mystery. Some rely on scientific evidence, others embrace legends and speculation, but none has produced a single explanation that accounts for every verified observation. Perhaps that is why the story continues to fascinate people around the world. It reminds us that even in an age of satellites, artificial intelligence, and constant surveillance, nature can still confront us with questions we cannot answer. There are places on Earth that remain beyond complete understanding. There are events that resist simple explanations, and there are mysteries that continue long after the investigation ends. Maybe one day, a new discovery will reveal exactly what happened. Perhaps another expedition will uncover evidence hidden deep beneath the remaining mountain. Or perhaps the truth disappeared forever with the missing summit. Until that day, this case remains what it has always been. A mystery balanced between science, history, and human imagination. And maybe the most unsettling thought is not that an entire mountain seemed to disappear overnight. It is that if something so vast can challenge everything we think we know, how many other mysteries are still waiting, hidden in places we have already looked? The mountain never returned. Neither did the certainty that the world always behaves the way we expect. Sometimes the greatest mysteries are not the ones we solve. They are the ones that remind us how much remains unknown.